sound better.
Okay, so we are now back with another video, our second pro tip video, where we are going to discuss about piano roll tips. So basically, we know that the piano roll is where we put our chords and melodies in. It's where the magic happens because this is where we put the secret ingredient of our track. So the first tip that I want to share with you guys is the background waveform. So what it is it will serve as a guide, especially if you're programming melodies and beats. For instance, we have the drum right here, FPC. Let's go with a preset. Let's go with the dubstep. We now have a bunch of sounds right here. We have the kick, snare, and a bunch of stuff. So what we can do right now is we can drag a sample here on the piano roll, and that will serve as a guide. Let's say, for example, a loop. How about this one? Now you can see that it's perfectly quantized with the grid. You can see these arrows right here because this one is from FL. So if you're using a different sample, maybe you have downloaded something on the internet. So what you need to do is you need to set that up according to the tempo, right? For example, it's 128, then you need to set that tempo to 128. And you can then activate a macro called switch audio clips to real-time stretching. So now what we can do here inside the piano roll, now that we have this guide, we can analyze it. So we know that this right here, this huge waveform right here is the kick, right? So let's listen to it. So we know that the hi-hat is constantly playing. Wait. Snare. Oops. Maybe let's look for a snare that has more of the top end. How about this? Let's listen to it. So we now have this beat. The second piano roll tip that I want to share with you guys are these two special features inside the piano roll, which is the slide and the portamento. These two special features are often disregarded by a lot of producers, maybe because there's not a lot of information about it, because a lot of producers online are using Massive, Serum, and Silent, and unfortunately this one doesn't work with third-party plugin. It only works with the built-in plugins of FL. Let's say, for instance, we have this synth called Harmless, right? So what we can do is we can program a chord. Let's say, for example, C. This is how it sounds when we don't put any slide or portamento in it. But if we put a slide, it would sound like this. It can also be color coded. For example, you have this C chord right here, and it corresponds to this note slide, which is also green. But if we add a note which is blue, oops, let's deactivate the slide for now. We only need the regular one, C, and we add a slide which is also blue right here. You can hear that there's a variation between the two chords, because this one right here, this blue chord right here, corresponds to this one on the blue slide note, and the green one corresponds to the green slide note. So the portamento, on the other hand, works differently. because it functions every after end of the note. So let's say, for example, we have this piano right here. Let's add a melody. Oops. And we add the first note, that is Portmento. See? And the following one should not be Portmento. Did you hear that slight note variation? It's kind of like a fast note variation from this note right here to this note right here. So if you listen to it, oops. This here. So that's it. The third piano roll tip that I want to share with you guys are these tools that I really find useful when it comes to arranging chords and melody inside the piano roll. And it seems like a lot of producers disregard a lot of these tools, right? They only use the quantize function, which is very common, especially if you arrange using your MIDI keyboard. But what a lot of producers didn't know, that you can extract new ideas from these tools. So what we can do is we can put a chord, let's say a C. We have a C major triad here, right? So what we can do is we can go to tools. We can select between the arpeggiator and the randomizer. The arpeggiator basically will articulate the chords for you vertically. So you now have a lot of note inputs right here. So if you play it, you can adjust the range. You can select a bunch of options here. And a whole lot more with the pan, velocity, release, and the mod X, mod Y, and the pitch as well. We can also use the randomizer. In the randomizer, you can adjust the note length and also the number of notes. Same goes with the arpeggiator. You can also adjust the panning, velocity, and the release. And another thing is the strum. The strum is basically a tool inside the piano roll that allows you to make a guitar plugin. Let's say, for example, Music Lab's real guitar. If you have that and you have this function, then it will be easier for you to program guitar sounds. Because as we all know, if we play guitar, we can't always play all the notes all together at the same time. It always starts with the bass note, the second note, the third note, the string rather, the fourth string, and so on. You can also see that if you play a guitar player in slow motion. So what we can do is we can adjust this time. As you can see, it moves. The beginning of the two notes moves. You can adjust this from left to right as well, and from right to left. In there, you can be more creative. So the last one that I really find useful is the glue. Oftentimes producers just do this. If they have this instance, for example, this situation right here, and they want to merge all the notes, what they do is just they delete it and they expand the first note. But what you can do, and what they didn't know, is you can glue all these notes together. And this is a unique feature inside FL Studio because I didn't see this feature in Ableton and Studio One. I don't know about other DAWs, but yeah, for me this one is uniquely inside FL Studio. So what you can do is you can select it, you can hover over here and click glue, or you can just hit Control G. So for me, I like using shortcuts, so I go for Control G, and there you go. The fourth piano roll tip that I want to share with you guys are time markers. Time markers are basically guide for you to locate where your intros are, where your verses are, where your choruses are, or your drops. And again, this feature often is disregarded by a lot of producers that I see online. Maybe because they just want to arrange stuff without thinking about some other things, where in fact, this can actually help them stay organized. Let's say, for example, here, in this case, we have an intro because that's usually where the song starts, intros. So I can go to these options, select time markers. Always remember to select add one first, Alt-T, rename it intro. Or you can just execute the shortcut, Alt-T, and you can rename it. Let's say we have an intro for bar number 1, and after 4 bars, we have a verse right here on bar number 5, starting on bar number 5. So what we can do is we can execute Control T, again, not Alt T, because if you execute Alt T and name it, the marker will begin here on bar number 1. So always remember to execute Control T after that Alt T in the beginning. So Control T, right click, rename, verse. It can also be applied inside a playlist. Again, Alt T, intro. After 4 bars, we have verse, Control T, right click, rename, verse. And that's how you stay organized. This fifth piano roll tip is geared towards those producers, those people who doesn't know that much about music theory, and also for those people who just started out using FL Studio and doesn't know that much about the settings, the special features inside the FL Studio's piano roll. So the good news for you guys is that ImageLine actually develops this feature called the scale highlighting. Now, this is one of the unique features inside FL Studio, which makes FL Studio good for beginners. And what we can do is we can navigate here on the options, go to the helpers. You can see that we have this scale highlighting options right here. And right now we are in automatic mode, which means that I can put a certain note, let's say C. And if I put a triad C, then the piano roll automatically detects the scale, and it will automatically highlight the scale. The black highlighted area are the parts that you must avoid to stay in tune, because if you put a certain note here, then it's not in the C major scale anymore. So another thing that you can do is you can navigate back to the helpers, scale highlighting. Let's say, for example, you have a project in D major. Just click this major right here, go back to helpers again, and click D. Now you can see that all the D notes are highlighted in gray here on the piano view, right? So that means that this piano roll right here is in D major scale. Another thing that you can do is you can use scale stamp. Let's go back to the helpers and deactivate it. Let's put it in automatic mode. Now we have the scale stamp. What a scale stamp does is it generates a scale pattern for you. Let's say, for example, a major scale, right? I want to work with a C major scale, so I will click the area where the C starts in. I know for a fact that this one is C right here, so I'll draw the scale on this area on bar number 2. So what I can do is I can just click here, and there you go. You have it generated for you. The next piano roll tip that I want to share with you guys is about ghost notes. Ghost notes are useful especially if you're working with a bunch of sounds that's playing all together at once. Example, maybe you want to work with your melody for your drop and you have 5 synthesizers that's playing on the same pattern. Or maybe you're working with a huge orchestra project where you have to stack a bunch of strings all together. The good news is that in FL you can edit all those notes together at once. Now we now have this feature in Ableton and Studio One, but in FL there's a unique way of doing it, but they have to be on the same pattern, right? So for example, this close grand number 1 should be on pattern 1 along with the other instrument. It won't work if this one is in pattern 2. So what we can do right here is we can go to either one of them, and we can alternate between each instrument by navigating here, right there. So now what we can do is we can go to piano roll options, helpers, edit ghost channels. So now you can see the notes that are playing behind these chords, right? Right now we cannot edit it. We can only replicate what it's done using the current instruments that we're into. So in order for us to edit this, we need to activate editable ghost notes. So we go to piano roll options, helpers, editable ghost notes. So there you go. You can now edit this. You can jump inside the piano roll of this ghost note by right-clicking it, double right-clicking it, right there. Same goes with going back. Just do the same thing with the other note right there. So that's it.